So my name's Julian Park. I'm from the University of Reading, which is in the south of England, and I chair the ICA Edu Board, the ICA Educational Board, and it's usually my delightful honour to chair these webinars. So this is actually our second webinar focusing on One Health, which follows the Rectors Forum that happened last October, which also had this focus. And it's clearly garnered quite a bit of interest across Europe. And I'm delighted that Alessia Lefebure has agreed to come and speak to us today. She's the Dean at the L'Institut Agro Rennes Angers, which is one of the French Grand Écoles. Alessia is a sociologist by training, and has worked across the world in New York at the University of Columbia, in Beijing, and in Paris, and has a really strong interest in One Health, partly because of an underlying interest in integrating the disciplines. So just before handing over to Alessia, I'd just remind colleagues that this is one of a regular series of webinars we undertake as part of the kind of ICA Edu offering. And it's in parts leading up to our own annual workshop, which this year will be in Zagreb, and we'll have a couple more webinars before that. But the workshop in Zagreb, 23rd and 24th of October, will focus on something which I think many of us are finding quite a challenge, and that is around developing our best practice in the context of the use of AI and artificial intelligence. So I just encourage you to look at the agenda for that when it's published, and to consider joining us, hopefully in person, but it could be online. So with no further ado, I hope you can see the slides. I said to Alessia I would host them here. So Alessia, you'll have to say, next slide, Julian, or something when you want me to move them on. And I think you're going to speak for about 30 minutes or so, and then hopefully some time for questions. If colleagues want to, as Alessia's speaking, type questions into the chat, that would also be a nice way of we can then collate those when we get to the end of the session. So Alessia, over to you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Julian, for accepting to chair the session, and thank you, Simon, as well, for having first the idea of following up on this discussion that we started at the last ICA forum with the rectors. Can you hear me well?
Yes. Can everybody see the slides?
We used to see them, and now they disappeared. But
give me a second. Sorry.
Okay, but anyway, at the moment I don't need the slides, so I can keep talking. Perhaps to clarify the status of this communication, as Julian mentioned, it's a sort of a twofold approach. At first, I come here to share something that our university at Grande École is implementing. So on the one hand, this is sharing practices. I don't dare to say best practices, because this is really in the making. You will see that it's a very new adventure, and in fact the purpose is really to share as we make it, also the concerns, the challenges, the surprises, and everything, because that could be useful for each of your institution. And on the other hand, as I am a sociologist working on higher education policies, this is linked to evolution of the landscape of higher education and research. So this is also something that really has a very strong interest in terms of research. And it could be interesting also to have a discussion on this second aspect, like what is that One Health is provoking in the arena of higher education institution and the public policies, right? So if we move quickly to the first slide, this is just to say that when we talk about One Health training programs, we are already into this large topic that One Health education. And I, together with a colleague of mine in France, Jean-Luc Angot, that some of you might know, high civil servant, very much involved into international work at, on One Health. We published a paper that came out this year in French, but now with intelligence, artificial intelligence, we can translate very easily anything. And we came up with some, so we try to understand why is it that there is this paradox that on the one hand, One Health, everybody agrees that we should move into a One Health approach. In the narrative of the politicians and all the international organizations, there is clearly a consensus. What is the consensus about is that we should adopt this new perspective that puts together human health, animal health, and ecosystem health. So I'm not going back to this. You heard it 100 times, right? So there, but at the same time, it's very astonishing that despite this consensus in the narrative, very little has been done in terms of changing the way we train the professional, right? So it's nobody said, yes, it's a good idea, but it's impossible to translate it into education. So there is a sort of silent agreement that something should be done at the education level to foster this paradigm shift, but nobody is in charge and very little has been done. So we try to review all what has been done in terms of education in the world and also on research. There's a part on research, which is probably less our topic today, but it's also interesting to mention because it's really the mirror. So the first experience is really in using the word One Health in education programs, comes as always in English-speaking countries, United States, Canada, UK, and of course some of the countries very much related to those for example, on the African continent, like Tanzania or other experience. All this is in the paper. I'm not going to detail this, but the review. But what is interesting is that usually these experiences came from veterinary school or school of public health. Never the initiative comes from life science or agronomy, right? So it's always coming from a perspective of either animal health or human health, the first momentum, right? The initiative. And if you look at the research, I was saying that it's a mirror. It's very interesting that there is abundant literature on this. People who took really the time to do the bibliometry and so forth, they really count the paper and the publication, and everything is around veterinary science and animal disease and zoonosis and infectious disease, and it's all this kind of literature. And sometimes the life science, very rarely earth sciences, and very rarely social sciences, right? So there is a sort of, for the moment, ambiguity, like what is the consequence on training programs once you say that you should combine the perspective of these three healths? Does it mean that we have to add new discipline? Does it mean that we have to work in a transdisciplinary way? All those are things that are a little bit underdeveloped and not very clearly addressed, it seems to I mean, what we found. So why is it important? It's not just the beauty, right? It's not just because we want to be consistent. Once that international organization decided that One Health is important, now we have to be consistent. It's also because, of course, the bottom line is that if we don't understand exactly the determinants of the emerging diseases, we are not going to be very effective in prevention, right? And it comes out that most of the determinants of infectious diseases are actually linked to practices of people who work in the field. Like in the field means farmers, right? Most of these practices in terms of the use of land, the soil, the water, breeding, all this has an impact. These are determinant, very strong. But at the same time, the veterinary and the human health doctors and the public health doctors, they don't have a very strong connection with the world of the agronomy and agricultural practices at large. So this is a little bit the nexus that is very much missing when you look at the training existing program, which are, and also not only starts from the veterinary school and public health, but very much is the program are hosted within the schools, right? So sometimes it's hosted in the School of Public Health, sometimes it's hosted in the School of Veterinary, so science, and there is no, I mean, I'm not judging this in the sense there is no problem with this, but it very much influences the way the program is shaped, the kind of discipline, and even the way the problems are shaped. So if we move to the next slide, right. So we could identify by reviewing all these training programs that there are basically two kinds of addressing this issue of education. On the one hand, we could, a first approach could be a little bit like with climate change. We consider that there is a sort of common framework of competencies that need to be known and shared by different professionals. So in other words, you add a module of global health in the human health profession training, in the veterinary science training, in the agronomist training, and so forth. So you actually design what is the sort of minimum set of knowledge and competencies that every professional should master, and then you implement it in each of the curricula, right? And so that's what's happening a little bit in France at the moment with climate change. So there is an understanding that everybody, whatever the job is, should be aware of some kind of basics about the climate change, so that he or she in the future activities will be able to act in a way not to go against this protection of the environment that is required given the knowledge that we have on climate change. So one approach could be, let's do the same with global health. So doctors, they continue to be trained as doctors, but they have a sort of compulsory module on global health. Could be a specialty, could be something in the beginning of the curriculum like general knowledge. The other approach is very different. It's people are trained in a different way, and at the one point they mix together and they are trained together, because what is important is not necessarily the common knowledge that they have, but that they understand how to work together. And so following this second approach, the most important is that these people at one point, they sit together in the same location and they are able to tackle one issue, exchanging their standpoints, they understand their constraint in their job, and they can find together a solution. Right? So this second approach, of course, on paper is, and the way I tell you, everybody says it's much better, right? But it's very difficult to implement. It's very difficult to implement for a bunch of reasons. If you take the French case, because this is where I work now, all these professions we're talking about, they are highly regulated. by the states. And I guess this is the case in most of the European countries. Like in order to become a doctor, a veterinary, and what we call engineer in agronomy, but someone who could, I mean, in other words, all this profession, it's not just a degree in a discipline. You have professional standards and a whole system that guarantees that you are really able to work in this profession. And so that makes that this has two consequences, this highly regulated way of training them. The first is that they are necessarily separate. And the second is that it's very long. These are very long training, and it's very difficult to add new things on these trainings, right? So, and in France, there is a third constraint, is that most of these people are civil servants. So you add on top of it the fact that they belong to different ministries, you have different administrations in charge of their training, and different administration in charge of deciding what they should learn, what they have to learn, what they can change, what can be changed in the way they are selected, trained, and promoted, and so forth. So the whole system is completely separated. Even if we take just veterinary and doctors in human health, it's two different ministries, of course, Ministry of Health and Ministry of Agriculture, right? So and we can take many other examples. If we, in France, for example, if you take the politicians, if we take the high civil servant in other fields, all these people, they have been separated from high school, because the French system is very segregated in a way, and already during your high school, depending if you choose more mathematics or social sciences, then it's already something that prevents you from going to certain professions, right? And so, in other words, these people not only they're not trained together, but they belong, and now I speak as a sociologist, but they really belong to communities of knowledge and values and system completely separated. So it's very hard to put them together back and make them be trained together. So if we move to the following slide, we can go. So in spite of all what I said, a lot of institutions, they are trying to overcome this and build things together. So I'm not going to mention all the French initiatives, which are very many. I just talk about this one that we chose today, but then in the second part of the time, I could answer two questions beyond this. But basically, the School of Public Health in France, there is only one National School of Public Health. The one of the veterinary school, the one of Lyon, and Institut Agro, which is the one I belong to, decided to sign an agreement in 2002 and decided to collaborate on professional training. What I mean by professional training is addressing the second approach I just mentioned, decide that people are, the veterinary, the doctors, and the other professions, they are trained in their separate system, but then they come for a sort of executive training during a few weeks. So the School of Veterinary of Lyon already had a program like this in One Health for a few years. And they decided to share it with us and with the School of Public Health, precisely because at one point they thought that they should, A, enlarge their target, and B, enlarge their pool of expertise to give a more holistic program on One Health. So why enlarging the target? Because as I described, the French system is very divided. Each of these schools is able to reach out to different constituencies in a way. So if we put together the one that we have here in a School of Life Science, the one that the veterinary have, and the one that the School of Public Health has, then we are able to pull together more diversity in the group of people that we train. And then yes, the expertise, of course, we don't have, of course, the same expertise. Even when we talk about water, the approach is going to be a little bit different. So actually, the degree that Lyon has became a sort of cross-school degree. In the French system, it's called un diplôme inter-établissement. It means that it's a kind of, it just says that different schools, they deliver the same program. And so we have a joint governance. I'm not going to detail. So it's basically 3 weeks of training with some modules that you could take alone, isolated, if you don't need the degree. So the One Health and Water is a small part of this larger degree, One Health in Practice. So this is just to explain you what the focus is. So you have the logo of these institutions. If we move to the next slide, we could go a little bit deeper into the content. So this is first of all the target. So when I say different professions, here you have, I don't need necessarily to read all of them, but just to give you a sense that who is potentially interested and who we should target when we talk about training in One Health. So the professionals in the environment, these are the ones that, for example, we train traditionally: ecologists, biodiversity managers, and people who work in national parks, protected areas. I didn't mention the marine areas, but also the sea and the fisheries there, right? Human health. So it includes the professional, the hospital system, the healthcare system, animal health, of course, but then central government agents, local government officials, all the ecosystem of the agriculture, of the farmers, including the agriculture chambers and professional organizations, the agencies for biodiversity, for health security and all these things, and of course the politicians. So these are the people that ideally we should train together. So if we move to the next slide, this is the content of just the module on water and One Health and Water. So there's an introduction with the general content, and all the rest is workshop. What we call workshop in French, we would say atelier. It means really that it's very interactive. It's not lectures, but this professional, the purpose is to have this professional do 2 things. One is using the diversity of the group to interact and discuss and discover, as they discuss and challenge issues, how different could be the perspective and the constraints of each of them. And the second thing is that together they go and meet professionals on the field through field trips, and they all challenge these professionals to understand how is it in the real life, right? So as you can see, water, we address water under all the aspects, including the social sciences, because it's water and territory, landscape. So it includes also the economic development aspect, not only the more scientific. And we address, of course, detection, treatment, and preservation of water resources. So there is also a very strong component of biodiversity. But we could move, we could go back to this later in the question and answer if you have questions, but we could move to the next one. So the next, did I miss one? If we go back, yes, sorry, I didn't mention one point in the one, the one with the objective and the structure. I very quickly had, I mentioned the method. It's the slide called One Health and Water Certificates Overview. I mentioned the mural. So one of the things that we have done is using a method that is very common now in France, which is the mural, la fresque. I don't know how many of you are familiar with this, but with climate now, one of the teaching methods that has been used to bring on board many people with climate change has been La Fresque du Climat, which is a board game, actually. We call it fresco, mural, whatever you want to call it, but it's a board game that allows the participants to understand the connection between action A and action B, and then what is the effect, right? So we have the School of Lyon has developed the same thing for One Health. If you go online and you look for Fresque One Health or Mural One Health, you find everything. So it's a workshop that it's used in this training. Why is it important? Because it's a board game, like, with very concrete people. They sit in a room, 7 people together, 8 people together. They have the card, they have the game, they have paper, they have pencil, and they understand why is it that by deciding this, I provoked this, right? So it's very important when it comes to people with different background, with different profession, that they can actually go back to something very concrete. And it has another virtue, is that because of the format, that it's a workshop, that it's a game, that it's easy, it's not very expensive, you can, and then you need to train the trainers all the time. So it becomes very easy to mobilize people around One Health seamlessly, right? You just say, I'm looking for new trainers. Would you like to come? We train you for 3 hours, and then you give the certificate so that you can be a trainer. So it's very easy, right? It's not ideological. It becomes much more like a game and a pedagogical activity. So if we go back to the last slide, the water, we use a field trip, as I mentioned, again, so that people can meet the real professional who work on specific issues. So in this case, because the School of Veterinary is in Lyon, they have chosen to go to a park, which is nearby Lyon. It's an urban park because it's really the outskirt of Lyon. But it's easy to reach with the public transportation, and it's very interesting because it gives you really the whole diversity of the issues that can be related to water, as you can see. But we could go back to this later in the question and answer. But in a way, you can study the health aspect, the biodiversity aspect, and the social sciences aspect at the same time. So to conclude, and then we can have time for reaction and sharing other things. Again, it seems very clear, brought from the perspective of those who work in institutions that are implementing public One Health training programs, and from the literature perspective, that it's very important that this creation of education programs, whether it's professional training or implementing programs into the bachelor and the master, both should be done. And this is probably going to be less difficult than 30 years ago, because for many other reasons, at least in Europe, we are moving into more transdisciplinary approaches. In other words, mainly because of the climate change, now it's a little bit easier to break this divide of disciplines, of areas, or the social sciences on the one side, the humanities on the other side, the life science on the one side, and the earth science separate. So together, because of the climate change, there is a sort of a window of opportunity for One Health to follow the same path. And at the same time, one question for us within ICA could be, what is this pushing us to do? Like maybe rethinking the partnership. Who are we collaborating with whom? If we take this example, a school of public health is not necessarily naturally going to establish, to set up a partnership with a school of life science, at least not in France, not traditionally. So this is to say that One Health is also acting as a sort of game changer in the landscape of the alliance, at least in France. We are witnessing this very much. So that could be also a question for us collectively within ICA, like as an association of European life science universities. should we be more proactive in the role that we want us life science has in this discussion and conversation? And without, it's not a matter of who has the leadership. It's not about challenging the leadership that some of the veterinary school or medicine could have, but it's more like, how can we contribute in a more active way, right? And not just being the representative of the plants, right? Which is a very, it could be much more than that, right? Because as you have seen, most of the profession involved with that could really work in reducing some of the determinants are in the field of the life science. So I suggest that we stop here, but of course, so that we have time, I think it's right, it's half an hour. So that we have time for you to react, challenge, share your experiences as much as you want, or ask questions so that I go back more in detail in some of the things that I presented very quickly. Thank you.
Alessia, thank you very much. That was very clear and I think a very useful presentation in getting us to think a little more clearly about One Health, but particularly how we, you know, how we move from theory into actually practically making this happen, which is always a big challenge. As ever, I've got questions, but I'd prefer if other members of the audience would start the ball rolling. If people want to ask any questions, do you want to turn on your camera or put up your hand? We'll see if it's a deluge. We'll try and manage that. Thank you, Marta.
Yes. Good afternoon, everybody again. Hello, Alessia, and thank you very much for sharing your experience and knowledge in that field. I was actually wondering, when constructing the program, did you have the feeling that every part of this triangle contributes in the same way, or did you have the feeling that one of them must be a little bit pushed to be equally involved? Or was it really equal contribution from, let's say, the animal, human, and environmental point of view, to make it simple?
So I'm not. So in this specific case, the peculiar thing is that we were working on a degree program that was already existing and that had been already shaped by the School of Veterinary. On the other hand, they came and looked for us. So there was no, we never felt that there was not enough space for us. But in fact, we came into a program which was very much already a little bit oriented from a vet and a human health perspective, right? So maybe, that's why we decided to work on a specific new module on water instead of introducing our expert in the pre-existing modules. So creating a small certificate from scratch, that could be a good way to have a balanced perspective from each of the contributors, right? Then maybe I didn't stress this enough, but we understood that entering through water, it's also a very good way to have all the professionals involved. In other words, so this is something that when we wrote the paper, we went and looked for the job offers, the announcement. We were looking for, is someone recruiting experts in One Health? And actually we couldn't find many. Nobody has a position of a One Health expert, except maybe a university that wants to recruit a teacher, like a professor teaching a specific course on public health. But in the real life of organizations, public organization, international organization, the job description One Health expert is extremely rare. And so that led us to the conclusion that people maybe don't identify themselves very much if you tell them you should be trained in One Health, and maybe don't ask for this training. Whereas if you tell them water, then it becomes very much concrete, or soil, or whatever, air pollution. That could be something that everybody recognizes, that yes, this is an interest for my job, my role, my mission. So, and then it's easy to put them together. So that's also another, it's not necessarily your question, but it's a follow-up to your question, Marta, that it's also...
That sounds very reasonable and very, very interesting to give people topic to contribute to, right? I'm always wondering if the medical contributors, if they feel somehow, I don't want to say more important, but when we face veterinarians, different life science specialists and medical doctors, then I sometimes have this feeling that it's not an equal relation. And that's why I was very curious to know if you found the balance or not.
So again, this is a specific situation maybe to France, but it's like a little bit the environment, the medical environment is like public health is probably very less ranked in the hierarchy among the other specialization in medicine, right? They are a little bit apart on the side. So I think for people who work in public health, because of environmental health, they don't have an issue in working with the others, especially with the people in life science or veterinary science. But when it comes to other medicine, then that's probably a different story. That's why it is important to train all the professionals, not only public health, right? Yeah. But that might be different from one country to another.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Marta. Thanks, Alessia. Other questions that want to come forward? That people want to put their hand up or flash onto the screen? Okay, I'll give people a second just to think. I guess I was interested, Alessia, on, you said each time the course run, I think you said you had a target of 20 people. Is that easy to fill, or do you have to get kind of, is it competitive? Do you have a short application process, or I mean, how is that process working? And do you tend to get people from certain areas? I mean, just following on from Marta's example, do you get more public health professionals wanting to do it, or do you get more environmentalists, or do you purposely try and have a cohort that is pretty well divided between the different expertise?
So that's why we, thank you for the question, Julian. That's why we decided to sign this agreement and to put our effort together, because what we observed in the French context, once again, maybe it's not the same in every context, but whenever the School of Veterinary opens a new program, they have the usual suspect coming to them, but they won't have people, for example, from agriculture, right? So there is a problem. There is a matter of image, legitimacy, and just habits, right? Tradition. So we thought that if we promote together the program, then each of us will be able to bring its own professional on board. So at the moment, the pre-existing program, the degree, it's very much a majority of veterinarians and people who work in the public health from the regional agencies, ICA in France, and very much more public sector than private sector. So that's at the moment the group composition. And so we should be the one who bring again this new people. And in the French system, there is a strong obligation to have like lifelong training, especially in the public sector. So there is not, it's like not really a competitive market in the sense that these people have to be trained. And public institution like us would be a sort of natural place where they go. The challenge is really that the topic is not on top of their list, not for all of them. So it's really, how do we find a way to, in a way, have them coming without really saying, if we say you need to be trained in One Health, it's not sure that we will go much beyond at the few professionals that work on infectious disease and zoonosis. That's all. But so we have to find either through innovative methods, pedagogy, or through the field trip, to find it a way more attractive so that they decide to go and see what is behind One Health.
Okay. I do have a follow-on question from that, but I see that Ramona's made a comment. I don't think there's a question in there, Ramona, but do you want to come in and say anything about your course, or ask any questions to Alessia? Don't worry if not.
Sorry, what is the? I didn't see the.
It's a colleague from Romania, from Cluj, who I think they've implemented a course, which sounds like it's more theoretical, but likes the sound of your approach. Yeah, as you say, Ramona, just a comment. Thank you.
Yeah, but I do agree. Actually, we have decided not to do anything very theoretical, but very practical, because we are targeting people who are already in their job. And so if we were to do this for the students, probably this would require some foundation and some more theoretical courses. But yes, it's also a challenge, because the person who really masters everything in the three health, it means someone who has studied for 30 years, right?
Yeah,
it doesn't, or it's artificial intelligence. But so we believe that it's much more important to share professional practices, because that's what we want to change. Actually, it seems from what we have understood collectively on One Health that it's much more a matter of changing the professional practices than acquiring new theoretical information and knowledge. In other words, One Health is not a discipline. It's not a discipline per se, right?
No,
it's just a different way of working.
Yes.
In prevention, in monitoring, and then in acting, right?
Thank you. Miki, nice to see you.
So thanks for your talk. I was just wondering to take it one step further, indeed, because One Health, as you said, it started from the veterinary with human health, especially on infectious diseases, and like that. I think we broaden it up already with the environmental. And I thought your example of water was a really nice example, because it can bring a lot of things together. And I understood from the water example, it's not only microbiological, it's also chemical, or it could be whatever. But it's still related to health in a broad sense. Is that how I have to understand it?
Yes, it's still the end. I mean, yes, in the end, it's still human health. I think we didn't stretch it up to the point that we say that we put on the same level the human health and the protection of the environment, right? For the moment, it's really towards a perspective of human health, but with a very strong accent on biodiversity and agronomical practices, like what is the use of the land, what is the use of the soil and the water by this was something a little bit missing. That is to say that the public health, they start to care when there is an incident, where is a strong pollution, but not ahead, right? How do we work with farmers very much earlier, before we have the epidemics, right? Before we have the emergence of the disease. And so we try to have a more complete, holistic, that's the word I found, but maybe it's not the correct, holistic, but in a way that we are much more on a systemic objective.
Yeah, because I think indeed that's already nice, but I mean, you could always broaden up and it will be much more challenging, because indeed you still work on health, like on epidemics. It's something that you can measure, but then you could end it up with mental health also and things. And even then I'm thinking really far, because we are actually thinking it at our courses how we want to do something interdisciplinary as well. The One Health for sure is that. But then to have some of our departments along who are not that much in One Health, then we are really thinking broader. Like you could do with climate and do all kind of aspects that you have to cross all kinds of disciplines to work together. But then that's, I think your slide is still on here, I see. It's really evolving towards a more interdisciplinary approach. You could do it actually on whatever topic. But the challenge is, of course, I think, to bring together the expertise and how to handle this. So is that for you also a challenge? You know, we already said how to bring together the people, but also the teachers or the people, they are very in their own discipline, how to handle that interdisciplinary, you know, to go across that.
It's a good point. It's always like asking the question, why are we doing that? And when I say it's not for the beauty, like the intellectual pleasure, it's in the end, we need to know why we're doing it. And I feel, but it's not just my thinking, I think I saw it in the literature as well, that probably if you have a territorial approach, that could be easy to understand why we're doing that. In a way, in a given territory, you can be able to ask yourself the question, what is that I need? What are the conditions that I need in order to have this territory healthy? And very often, I mean, when you start to say healthy for the people who live in it, then it necessarily requires that the animals, the wild and the breeded animals are healthy. And that means that the use of land by the farmers, but also by the industry and the cars and so on, is healthy. And today we are lacking robust methods to evaluate. For example, how can you tell to a farmer that his or her way to work is good? It's good for a healthy environment around him or her. This you are not yet able, but the day we will be able to do so, that will be revolutionary, right? You are able to give an economic dimension to the eco-services of a farm, like because you don't put any more pesticides, for example, then it means that not only you have this kind of results on your farm in terms of productivity and so forth, but also the benefit to the health of your territory. And so the scale could be an answer to your question, Mike. I don't know if it's a satisfactory answer, but I guess in order to have the feeling, not to have the feeling that it's never ending, like it's overwhelming. I think
I think indeed you need kind of a good defined societal problem that you want to solve.
Yes.
It's a kind of we tend to call it like going to this challenge-based education, where your challenge could be is now your One Health, but it could be transformed to other societal things. Yeah.
I think, Alessia, you remember at the start I said I was going to try and finish at 10:02. I think so. Now it may be a good time to end, and maybe that comment about you know, it seems to me we need a One Health revolution, you know, to move us forward in different territories across Europe. I'm sorry, I can't no longer just say the European Union, but different territories across Europe. That was a fantastic presentation. Thank you, and some good discussion at the end. Thank you very much. And I'm sure some colleagues on the call may be getting in touch anyway.
Sure.
But that's a really nice overview of one way we can think about taking you know, the One Health challenge forward. So thank you very much.
Great, thank you. And so I understand that within ICA we could have a follow-up on this issue in the months or years to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you everybody for attending as well. I understand if you're a member of the ICA Edu board, I think Simon wants us to stay on for a few minutes. So one or two of you have flashed up. Otherwise, thank you very much, everybody. Really nice of you to come along, and we'll catch up again soon.
And the recording will be online in due course. I'll let you know.